Hello and welcome dear students. In today's lecture we will be discussing Hegel's concept of state and civil society. Let me first highlight the important objectives of today's lecture. Number one, it offers an overview of the important political arguments that Hegel talks about in his book Philosophy of Right. Number second, it briefly analyzes his concept of freedom and state. Number third, it also assesses the historical specificity of Hegelian ideas on state and civil society in a larger context. And finally, to outline the main important features of state and civil society. The philosophy of Hegel was meant to reconstruct the modern political philosophy. For Hegel, the problem religion and metaphysics were perennial than political issues and ideas. Broadly speaking, Hegel's main concern was the opposition between the order conceptualized for systematic purposes and the understanding of ethical and religious tradition of Christianity. Therefore, the outstanding feature of Hegelian philosophy was the importance which he gave to the theory of state and civil society. Instead of individual or any other grouping of individuals, Hegel made state as a base for the interpretation of history and building his whole political thought. His major work, Philosophy of History, was purposefully established to exhibit the achievement of each nation state as an element of evolving worldwide civilization. Hegelian political philosophy had two important elements. One was the dialectic method, which he put forward for yielding new conclusions in human society. Second was the theory of political state and civil society as the embodiment of political power. Both became important concern for political philosophers after Hegel. However, for Hegel, the establishment of state was dependent upon the peculiar nature of relationship existing between the individual, family, civil society and state itself. According to Sabine, Hegel conceptualized state not a utilitarian institution but fully engaged with providing public services, administering the law, performing police duties and managing industrial and economic interests. Simultaneously, civil society was helping the state in performing these functions because civil society was itself dependent upon the state for sharp administration and fulfilling universal egoistic interests of the civil society. His important book, Philosophy of Right, critically analyzes that how individual freedom is embodied in the modern institutions of family, civil society and the state. In modern society, individual's life is strongly connected to these institutions. Accordingly, in this lecture, an attempt was made to make you understand the important tools required for approaching Hegelian political thought. Therefore, it is very important first to understand the evolution of the idea of state and civil society comprehensively. Hegel's state and civil society. Hegel was the most outstanding political figure to advocate or defend an organic premise of the state. He was the influential thinker of modern history. Major question before Hegel was, what is the state and why should I obey it? Hegel starts with the tentative generalization that the universe is a coherent whole. In this organic unity, what he variously calls the idea or spirit or reason or the divine mind is the only reality. Everything, including matter and the external world, is the creation of this idea or spirit or reason. Hence, it is true to say that reason is the sovereign of the world. It is the character of this spirit or reason that helps us to know all things. Hegel developed an answer to the question as discussed in background of this doctrine of spirit and dialectic. As per this doctrine, not only spirit is seeking its goal, but individuals are also in search of seeking their interests and passions. In order to serve their larger moral interest, state comes into existence to play the role of universal altruism. In Hegel's political philosophy, there are two elements that became his object of investigation. One was the idea or spirit, and second was the complex of human passion. Hegel believes that all material things are forms of the spirit which are in process of self-knowledge. To quote L44, through its multiple embodiments, world progresses from the inorganic world to the organic world of plants and animals, until it eventually comes to an imperfect consciousness in man. Man is the highest physical embodiment it has ever attained or ever will attain. He further adds, beyond man, no further physical evolution or progress is possible. Individual is not apart from the heterogeneous institutions of society because they serve him to fulfill his interests. He lives with others and he is depending on them as they are depending on him. History reveals that the earliest institution that serves man's sensual needs is the family. It provides protection and provision for providing simple needs. Unity for members is real than members itself. For Hegel, it is family which is the starting point to understand the evolution of state. The family is a unity incorporating the cogent idea of each other's affection and love. But for the satisfaction of individual interests, it is too small. As children will go, they will leave it for wider world. That wider world is world of civil society or world of bourgeois society. It will become an antithesis to the original thesis, that is family. Family, which is a unity, is perceived as real by its members than themselves. Civil society is host of men and women which are held together only by ties of contract and self-interest. In family, there is mutual love, and in civil society, there is universal competition. In civil society, or what Hegel calls bourgeois society, the process of trade and industry becomes new organization for the supply of human needs. It is through this organization that man is able to satisfy his own wants and serving his fellows as well. This makes it a rational and universal significant egoism. Hence, bourgeois society evolves its own rules and regulations, establishes a police force and becomes a more like state in form. As it develops, it produces guilds and corporations. They teach individual to think how to serve its interests individually as well as collectively. For Hegel, social instinct at civil society level is competitive, and at the state level, state instinct is cooperative. Thus, a family, which is the thesis, is a unity which is held together by love and knowing no difference, is countered by civil society as its antithesis. This antithesis is an aggregation of individuals who possess self-interest and which are held apart by competition. They do not know what is unity, though they are struggling hard for greater unity but are not able to achieve it. The synthesis which preserves the best in thesis and antithesis is the state. It is the only thing that strikes a balance and cooperation between family and civil society. It is possible, Hegel believes, because state is a superorganism or universal apex development. It raises both family and civil society to higher order by consciously identifying himself with the whole. This higher power, that is state, wills the interests of the whole. Hence, in Hegelian terminology, the essence of the modern state is that the universal is bound up with the full freedom of particularity and the welfare of individuals, that the interest of the family and bourgeois society must connect itself with the state, but also that the universality of the state's purpose cannot advance without the specific knowledge and will of the particular, which must maintain its rights. The universal must be actively furthered, but on the other side, subjectivity must be wholly and vitally developed. Only when both elements are there in all their strength can the state be regarded as articulated and truly organized, unquote. For Hegel, the state, which is meant to serve the objective of universal altruism, seeks a balance dialectically between the internal elements of both family and civil society. As in the case of family, the state functioned in a manner that the interests of everyone are increased and extended. It represented the universal tendencies within civil society, thus giving rise to the notion of political membership. The state had its reality in the particular self-consciousness raised to the place of universal. The state was absolutely rational and had substantive will for realizing itself through history and was therefore eternal. This substantive unity is its own motive and absolute end. In this end, freedom attains its highest right. This end has the highest right over the individual, whose highest duty in turn is to be a member of the state. Hegel presumed the state as an objective in itself. To realize this end, individual mind has to reach to its final goal through history. As an idealist, Hegel believes that the state is just like an organism, having the highest right over the individual, whose highest duty in turn is to be a member of the state. Many political theorists believe that Hegel holds that state is a public institution, but he was not able to differentiate between what is private and the public sphere political realm. However, Hegel did examine thoroughly the different components of the state, like the rule of law, the bureaucracy and the monarchy. Thus, the most significant contribution in Hegel's political philosophy is his theory of state. The axiom on which his theory is rooted is what is rational is real and what is real is rational. It means it is for the reason that everything exists in the world, or whatever is according to reason exists. Philosophically speaking, the basic premise of Hegelian notion of state is the unfolding of reason or spirit or absolute idea through a process of dialectics. Thus, reason gets its perfect realization in the state, and state is reason personified. Hence, what is rational is real, which means state is rational, state is real. He considered state as the march of God on earth, or the ultimate embodiment of reason. He considered the state as march of God on earth, or the ultimate embodiment of reason. State for Hegel is the highest manifestation of reason because it emerges as a synthesis of family and civil society. Hegel's understanding of the state is unique and notable in several ways. Firstly, he is very generous in praising the state because freedom enters into its highest right. In philosophy of right, Hegel claims state represents the apex of the system of right. It is very important for the full potential realization of real freedom. The second notable feature of Hegelian philosophy of state is his notion of rational state. Thirdly, Hegel uses the term state in two senses, broader and narrower. In broader sense, state constitutes the other institutions of society like family and civil society that make up modern society. In narrow sense, it is specifically related to governmental institutions which include a bicameral legislature, a meritocratic executive and a constitutional monarchy. Fourthly, for Hegel, the idea of state is the idea of political community, and this idea of political community is a collective effort of the people to define itself in managing their collective life together. According to Hegel, the political community subsumes all other kinds of social life or communities. Its decisions are made at the level of the state that governs other kinds of social interaction. At political community level, social interactions are not conditioned by nature, but come consciously and depends on rules that are made at a political level. The family, for example, is not a natural institution, but its form is decided by the political community. In this way, the state or political community is prior to other communities like the family or civil society. According to Hegel, modern family and civil society are embodiments of freedom. The modern state as their precondition thus also becomes a realization of human freedom. Fifthly, Hegel provided a divine origin of state, which is the culmination of divinely guided growth of absolute idea or reason, or what he calls Geist. Sixthly, state is an end in itself. It is the whole which is the greater than the parts. Seventhly, state is unchecked by any moral law, for the state is the creator of morality. It is the state which has made the men moral. Individual can never plead conscience or the moral laws against the state. For Hegel, state is infallible. Eighthly, the state is the interpreter of the customs of the community, which are indeed the collective reason of the past. The interpretation comes in the shape of the laws of the state. Ninthly, the state is not only absolute in its relations with its subjects, it is absolute in its relations with other states. The state in its relations with other states is not bound by any rules at all. The highest law is its own welfare. Tenthly and lastly, in Hegel's state, the individuals have no right to resist the commands of the state, because they are the creatures of the state. They are what the state has made them. The individuals are the organs of the organism, that is a body politic. Therefore, from the discussion that we have made, it becomes very clear that these unique features of Hegelian state are applicable to an ideal state, a state which exists only in idea. Hegel at numerous places identifies his ideal state with Prussia. To Hegel, Prussian state had reached the apex of the development of human society as per the dialectic formula, and no other development was possible. There was nothing higher and more perfect than the Prussian state, and beyond it in the evolutionary process. Dear students, let us now talk about Hegelian theory of civil society. Ethically speaking, the important formation between the family and the state was the dome of civil society. They are totally modern concepts, because Hegelian understanding of what constitutes social was different from the ancient understanding. For example, the Aristotle's understanding of civil society was identical with political community. Similarly, Cicero described civic as an important aspect of civility or knowledge of civic affairs and prudence. For Hegel, the nature and basis of civil society are different from those of the family and the state. In family, the bases are love and affection. In state, it was governed completely and impartially by a universal class, the civil service. According to Hegel, civil society reflects a system of needs where the individual is pursuing his own interests. This pursuance is according to the inclinations and abilities of the individual. The new science, which is based on the functional specialization, was of greater significance because it had revealed the laws which govern the individual's behavior in civil society. According to Hegel, civil society contained three distinct and interconnected features. These are number 1, system of needs, number 2, administration of justice, and number 3, need for police and cooperation. According to Hegel, the systems of needs are particular needs of particular individuals. They are subjective needs and exist in contrast to universal principles. The administration of justice is important because individuals in modern society have the right to own and alienate property. Its significance is vital because it protects the individual rights and punishes those who violate them. Another important concern for Hegel was the need for police. He justified this shift from administration of justice to police in these words: in the system of needs, the livelihood and welfare of each individual is a possibility. Its actualization is conditioned by the individual's own arbitrary will and particular nature. It seeks its further fulfillment by the objective system of needs. Through the administration of justice, a violation of property rights or personality rights of the individuals are violated. As Wood also explains, Hegel's term police cover what we would call the welfare system. The fourth element of civil society for Hegel was the corporations. The corporations are mainly associations of workers in trade and industry who share the same profession. Members who belong to the same corporation see their fellow members almost as family members and realize that the fulfillment of the needs of fellow members is beneficial to their own interests. As members of different corporations, individuals acquire an idea of a collective interest. Hegel called the corporations the second ethical root of the state after the family, because each corporation encourages its members to see the complementarities of their interests. Dear students, to conclude today's lecture, we can say that within a few years of Hegel's death, his political thought became a matter of fierce debate and dispute. For many political theorists, Hegel's essential philosophical commitment was how to accommodate the current political status quo. His preface of the book, Philosophy of Right, proclaims the prudence of the actual and very comments about the political theorists have encouraged readers to view this as a continuation of the European social life. Later on, the context of new political and historical events of the Germany, the right view Hegelian reading was stretched further for reconsideration. Hegel was criticized by Karl Popper as a glorifier of the Prussian state, a defender of authoritarianism, and a precursor to 20th century fascism and totalitarianism. Besides this, Hegel considers state as a relative organization expressing at each stage of its development the degree of rationality at which mankind has arrived. Critics further says one hardly knows whether to call his theory of the state a conservative theory, which nevertheless admits the necessity of growth, or an evolutionary theory which nevertheless stresses the importance of conservation. Many believe that Hegel defined politics a mere compromise of interests and law, just a command. It is not surprising to believe that Hegel's doctrine of police state is also a part of man's moral end. He identifies the principal freedom with the edge of obedience and principle of equality with discipline. He also treats the individual personality of the human beings as merely medium of the divine energy and absorbing them in the state. Popper also criticized Hegel on the grounds of defending totalitarianism and an enemy of open society. The origins of Hegel's historicism to three ideas developed by Aristotle, linking individual or state development to a historical evolution, a theory of change that accepted concepts like an underdeveloped essence or potentiality and the reality or actuality of an object was reflected by change. The first one led to the historicist method, which in Hegel assumed a form of worship of history. The second one linked the underdeveloped essence of destiny, and the third helped Hegel to formulate his theory of domination and submission, justifying the master-slave relationship, unquote. Finally, Popper sees Hegel a loyal student of Heraclitus, Plato and Aristotle. Thank you, dear students, for patiently listening to my lecture. I hope you enjoy it.